what we're trying to do here is we got the entire setup done. This is pretty much how the engine is going to set in the car. What I've got, starting with the new setup for the cam and crank sensors right here, is just a little bolt with some clamps. Instead of a plastic, like a zip tie mechanism, here goes your coils. We're going to redo the coil and plug setup we had last time. There was no need to change that. I just had to replace the burnt ones, which were mostly these right here. Probably could have reused these, but the connectors were kind of melted on. So what's special about this setup is this right here. Nobody has done this before, not even the Honda guys have tried doing a dual quad setup. So the reason why I'm doing this, for the most part, this is the main reason. There's several little side benefits, but is that this right here is, I'm trying to solve airflow, like the airflow dynamics. So whereas in the original holley intake I had, the intake would come through here and come around, and by the time it gets through here, because these three cylinders get the majority of the air, these two right here don't. There's just no way, it's not possible, because the first cylinders it runs into are right here. Well, these right here, they're getting the scraps. These front three cylinders are not getting as much air as the rear three cylinders. There's just not. So what this setup is trying to solve is that these three cylinders will get the same amount of air as three cylinders, and it should speed up the length it's going to shorten the length of travel air has to go through. Instead of going through here and all the way to here, all it has to do is go through here and into the intake runner. And I'll tell you that these throttle bodies sit directly over the intake runner ports. As you hear, let's go and crack her open, and you can see those intake ports. They are directly under the throttle bodies, and including here, pretty typical LS plate. But with this pattern, you don't have to stick with that original Holley EFI cast aluminum intake. You can do something like this, even the Honda guys. For the Honda guys, you can do this. These right here are 4150 kind of eBay throttle bodies. And you're not, obviously, they might leak, but we're not running boost here, so the leaks are not as important if they might leak. And I don't even think they're leaking. They seem to be pretty solid. But these are only at $120 a piece. They're no name brand, but these work. And what I'm really trying to do, and I don't really know what it's going to do until after I get in the car and fight it the first time, is to see if we can pick up some horsepower, because we're evening out the air between the cylinders, and we're shortening the length of travel that the air has to go through into the throttle bodies. Now, there's a couple of side benefits that you probably don't think of, is that these are progressive throttle bodies. So, they should be easier to tune, and I'll show you why. Because when I knew that Quadrajet, like carburetors, which is kind of what this is based off of, had this, but I wasn't really sure about it with throttle bodies. It says, so under a certain amount of load, your throttles only open up part way on one side. So you have a total of about 20 millimeter throttle here, 20 millimeter, 20 millimeter, 20 millimeter, about equivalent to 80 millimeters of throttle body between the two. So, but when you go to full throttle, or once you go past this threshold, you start cracking open all four until it looks like this. So some of the bad side of big singles is it's harder to tune, because the amount of air that comes through suddenly spikes up, and it's not really a smooth ramp. Well, I'm not saying this is not going to have a bit of spike to it, but it might be smoother and be more streetable than a big single throttle body, because now you're really only using half. But when you want it, you have equivalent to 160 millimeters worth of throttle body. And then, let's see, there's some other ones. What was it? Oh yeah, the other thing is too, because a big single, what happens when you have a big single throttle body is that because it's so much bigger, it doesn't have as much velocity to come through it. So with smaller throttle bodies, you have more velocity, but they normally can't supply enough air for one single throttle body. But when you have many small throttle bodies, it'll make up the difference. So now you should have more velocity at lower RPM and lower throttle inputs, so you can pick up a little bit of torque at the bottom end and still maintain that extra torque and extra velocity of more flow at the top end when you crack everything open, and now you have a 160 millimeter throttle body. So I'm actually hoping we might pick up a little bit easier tune, more horsepower, and the cylinders should be able to run more evenly across all 6 cylinders. Like we'll say these cylinders run at 88% because they have less air, and these are running closer to 95% because they have more air, fresher air. So it should even out the air to about 95% between all 6 cylinders. And because these are going to sit outside of the hood, you are now sucking in cooler, more ambient air temperature as opposed to under the hood and having to put the cold air intake and stuff like that, which is going to look funky. It's 2 throttle bodies from an LS, and they're not going to be sitting front to back like a rear-wheel drive car. They're going to be sitting side by side. So it's going to look funky. I'm going to have some air cleaners on it. I'm going to try to get the small ones that are only about like this. I don't want it to look like a clown show sticking up this high up the throttle. So something relatively low profile as I can. Try to make it not as funky looking, but it's going to be funky looking no matter what. So with that, we're trying to shorten up those runners and make air get into the cylinders. That's the main benefit that I think we're going to see of this. How much power I gain, don't know, but I know even like Frankenstein Motor Works, when they put the 2GR FE into that MR2, they were picking like 400 plus horsepower, like 355 horsepower is what they made, but that was with the original Holley intake. What will be the difference if they actually choose to go with a dual quad with the top feed? You might even pick up more. I don't know. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. We'll go through the outro video, but dude, I can't wait. Nobody knows what this is going to do, and nobody's really tried it before, so it's a complete unknown. This is all uncharted territory. Don't know, but I'm more than willing to give it a go. Give it a good old college try and see whether or not we pick up some power out of this. I think we are, because I just don't see how we don't, because the air is only going maybe 8 inches now, as opposed to 16 to 18, 20 inches. It should straight through right into the cylinders, and we should pick up cooler air, more air, and it might even change the way the engine sounds because we got such big throttle bodies, and the amount of air that it should be able to pick up, including the velocity, should be different at low RPM and part throttle and in full throttle. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in a minute. So with that being said, I'm really close to putting the motor back in the car. Like cam seals, I got my CV joint, and cam seal, CV joint, and the shift cables. That's the main thing I'm looking for now, is my shifter cables. They got smoked in the fire. They're all frayed out. The metal material is still intact, but it's frayed. So clearly it got really freaking hot. So we're swapping out those shift cables with a new set, or a used set that hasn't been caught in the fire yet. We'll swap all that over and put them in the car. I know a couple of little tweaks and stuff like that in the car, but for the most part the chassis is ready to go. Brake lines are, we're good to go on that one. So and I cleaned up some. That's a little bit of, we're here. I went ahead and painted that one because it was rusty, and I went ahead and cleaned that up. And once we get the engine ready to go in, we'll take this off because it's basically on studs. The actual pedal itself, we'll lift it up with the throttle linkage on there. Then run the cable out that hole up there and hook it to the engine. I'll have to measure to get the length of cable I need, so you have to bear with me. I don't know exactly how much length I need, which is why I haven't ordered everything yet. I just don't know what the length is going to be. And then we'll clean up all that, straighten it up. But most of the harness is still here. The body harness is straight. There you go.